The oral history interview of Edward Samuel Deitsch of the 17th Armored Infantry Battalion, 12th Armored Division, World War II, at the 65th Reunion, Washington, D.C., August of 2011. First, I want to thank you for agreeing to sit with me and take an interview, sir.
Well, you're certainly welcome.
And let's just start at the beginning. What did you do before you entered the Army? Where were you when the war started?
I was in the optical business, and I had been there from 1938 to 42, and of course was drafted December the 23rd, 2 days before Christmas. And I was shipped to Camp Meade, and my first job I got was sweeping sparks off the tents. They had these little egg stoves in there, and sparks would come out, but it was raining and hailing. You couldn't start a fire with a gasoline can. And my duty was get out there and sweep those sparks off from 12 o'clock to 4 in the morning. So that was my first initiation in the Army.
Now tell me about going from a civilian job like the optical business into the Army. How did you adjust? Did you adjust pretty well?
Yeah, I had no problem. I had no problem. And of course, eventually I wound up at Camp Campbell, Kentucky, and picked up the 12th Armored there, and I was put into the 56th Armored Infantry. And the irony of that was, my father in World War II was in the 56th Pioneer Infantry. So from there we went at Camp Campbell. We were shipped out after maneuvers at Camp Campbell. We shipped out to Camp Barkley, and that's where we did the rest of our training.
Yep. Tell me a little bit about moving to Texas and how you found the area.
Hot and dry. Hot and dry. The one thing I remember most when we were on maneuvers, the vehicles moving along the road looked like they were splashing water, but it was dust. And it was about 101, 102, and we were thirsty and supposedly had been cut off from our kitchen unit. So helicopters come over to drop us something to eat. So we all got our sandwiches and opened up peanut butter. We couldn't even spit cotton balls. And they gave us peanut butter sandwiches. So that was the beginning of Army life, real Army life.
Now, tell me about your trip from there up to Camp Shanks by train.
We went from Camp Barkley. Actually, from Camp Barkley, we entrained to New York, and we got on. We were boarded on the Empress of Australia, and then of course we supposedly were supposed to land in France, but the 4th Armored Division took quite a beating, and they had used up a lot of our equipment that was sitting there waiting for us. So we had to spend 2 weeks in England until they were able to get some equipment to replace what they used of ours.
Anything you can tell me about the trip itself on the ship? I've heard a couple of good stories about it.
On the Empress of Australia, I think they just got through hauling cattle and they didn't hose it down yet. And they had tables marked for 10 persons, and we had to get down in the hold and put about 20 there with full field packs on that table. So it was kind of crowded going over, and I think it took about 17 days to cross. Instead of landing at Le Havre, we landed over on the England side because we had to wait for equipment. But we were there, I guess, about 2 weeks.
So finally, the trip across the Channel to France.
Yeah, and that was, our ship didn't get over there till about 1 in the morning, something like that. And we had full field pack duffel bags take over one of these Jacob's ladders, these rope ladders, carrying all this stuff. that was scary because those ships were sitting pretty high up out of the water. But from there, we had our other equipment waiting. We had to degrease it and clean it up. And then we went on up into battle. And I'm not quite sure where we hit our first encounter. But
Now,
it was in France, of course.
Now, as a member of the 17th Armored Infantry Battalion, what was your combat duty? Were you a rifleman?
No, I was a combat medic. We were in the combat medical detachment. Not the 82nd now. This was the 17th Armored Infantry Medical Detachment. And every time a company went into battle in, say, AM, we had to get aid men to follow the infantry in so they'd be right there to give them first aid. So we put maybe 3 or 4 men to a company when they went into battle. And we had some sit back with the reserve. And of course, they set up an aid station. That wasn't the 82nd. The 82nd was behind us. And of course, from there, we replaced men that were lost. And the medical detachment had quite a few lost men. It really did.
Can you tell me about your first combat experience? Or what you recall of it?
Well, I know we were in some French town and the Germans started shelling us. So everybody had to get off the streets and got out of the half tracks and took to the cellars of the French homes. And the next morning, when our artillery got into play, then we moved forward and we started going forward and taking town after town. I couldn't quite remember what towns they were, but I do remember going through Alsace-Lorraine because my father used to talk about Alsace-Lorraine when he was with the Pioneer Infantry. So that was kind of a weird feeling, me going through the same towns that he was going through.
Yeah. Now, in our previous discussions, we talked about your role in the Battle of Herlisheim.
That was quite a battle. When I got it, I was running up to get into Herlisheim. Our outfit was hung up, met a lot of fire right at the very edge of town. And I can remember to my right, I was just running past burning tanks, our tanks, and maybe a dozen of them or whatever. And by the time I got up into the very big, well, it was the end of street of Herlisheim, there were houses on both sides, single houses, and maybe 20, 30 feet between them. And as soon as I hit the street, I had to clamber through a window to get out of small arms fire and mortar fire they were throwing at us. And I do remember Major Logan, he made his headquarters, the CP, about 3 houses up, and we were like the second house up. So they were across the street and made their CP there. And eventually, we went out, if I can recall, we went out the side door, my buddy and I, we were the only two in that one house. And I think that was Sergeant Weller, we called him Morris Weller. We went out the side door to run up to the street side to see if there was anybody we could help. Just as we got to the very edge of the house, 2 Germans popped out of the barn in the back, and then on the hock, we put our hands up, and they were motioning to come in. They wanted us to come to the barn, and they were holding these, what we call burp guns, machine guns. And instead, we did the thing we thought we'd get away with. We hit the ground and rolled in front of the house out of fire, and they jumped back into the barn. And the tank was right in the next house. One of our tanks saw what was happening, so he moved his tank up, rotated his cannon, put a round into the barn. And with that, another German tank pulls out between houses up the street, and we clamber on through the window, afraid we're going to be right in the middle of a tank battle. Well, we heard the Tiger tank get off the first shot. We knew our man got hit. So we said, let's take a look, see what we can do, and I want to see what the tank is up to. Well, we found out what he was up to. He was rotating his 88 cannon to our window where we just clambered through. And I yelled to my buddy, out the window, and he ran across the room. I ran, got kicked in the face with his boots. But I felt the heat and the concussion, and was actually blown through the window. And I felt the pain in my foot. So we clambered back into the basement and hid in the basement. And it was dark, it got dark by that time. And we were hiding down in a basement with Mort Weller and myself, and we could hear German voices outside walking around. We're expecting them to throw a grenade or something down the basement like we normally do, but nothing happened. So we stayed there till maybe 3 in the morning, something like that. So we'll go out the side door and we'll crawl till we get within that one burning tank. We didn't want to stand up because we would have been silhouetted against the fire on that tank still burning. So we crawled pretty much close to the tank and got up and ran. Well, they did open up with machine guns, but we were behind the tank by that time. And then we ran as much as we could to go back to our lines, and we crossed this little creek. It was ice, but it fell through, and we went into water up to our waist, but it felt good to me because my foot was really hurting, which happened to have a nail from the window that went right up through my boot. They found that out when they got me back to operate on that foot. And all I know is it hurt. So that was my episode there. And I think Major Logan and his group, I think they all got captured at that time. Because they had a German tank sitting right outside with the cannon right at the house, and told them they're going to blow the house apart if they didn't come out. So they came out with their hands up. Of course, that all happened when we went down and hid in the basement of the house, and then we escaped at night. And I wound up in a hospital, I don't know how many miles behind the line it was. But when they got me back there, they just gave me ether, put me to sleep, got my boot off and the nail out, and fixed up my boot and my foot. And I was there for about 10 days. And I said, I'd like to be shipped back to my outfit. And they did, they shipped me back. But Early nobody forgets Early.
Okay, further along in the war after Herlisheim, what else stands out in your mind? Do you remember the working with the French in the Colmar Pocket operation at all?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Well, tell me.
Well, I think our biggest problem we ran into when we crossed the Inn River, and that bridge was intact. They knocked off a couple Germans trying to put dynamite under the bridge, but they got them before they could blow the bridge. And we got across, but when we got across, the lead vehicle, when it went around one of the curves in the mountain, the road was blown out. And the Germans were right on the other side of it, opened up with machine guns. And I think they killed the people who were in the Jeep leading the column, and some in a half-track. And as medics, we ran up forward to see what we could do to help somebody. And there was a little, what I called a sheep herder's shack, a one-room shack, flat roof shack, and a lot of our guys were running in there. And I was on the downside of the mountain yelling across the road, no, don't go in. Because we also had a half-track sitting there with about 6 aerials up, and they were trying to hit that with a mortar, and also that little shack. And soon enough, they did put a mortar shell into that shack. Then they were yelling medics. I had to get up and get in there, and got about 4 of them out of there, and another one hit, and that's when I got hit. Then my buddy came up with a Jeep and got me back, and from that point on, I was in hospitals and going through surgeries. That was the second time I got wounded. Then I wound up in Walter Reed Hospital. And when they flew me back to France, and then they put me on a ship, and then flew me from North Carolina up to Walter Reed. And that's where I was discharged from. So it was an exciting trip, to say the least.
Absolutely. So, Where were you? Do you remember where you were when you got word that the war was over?
You mean the one at Herlesheim?
No, no, when VE Day.
VE Day.
Mhm.
VE Day, let's see, that was on the 8th, wasn't it?
Mhm.
I was in one of the hospitals, field hospitals, and they were flying me back to the ship, and then I got on a ship and went back to the United States. Yeah, and I got back sometime in, let's see, that was May the 3rd when I got hit the second time. Hospitalized May, June, and July. I think I got back sometime around August on a ship, and then went shipped up to Walter Reed. And I was there for about 2 weeks, and then got a furlough to go home. But when I came back, then I was discharged. Yeah, and I entered in December the 23rd, and that was in 1942. So it was a long trip.
So, what can you tell me about life after the war?
Hell of a lot calmer than it was during the war. I went right back to work in the optical business at the same place that I left. And I stayed there for about, I guess maybe 4 years. And there was another company, a smaller company, it wasn't a wholesale house. They actually made glasses for people and dispensed them, and optician. And they heard about me being back, and somehow got some information about the work I turned out. Well, they knew about some because we used to do some of their work. And they wanted to hire me, and I said, well, I've been with this company so many years, and I hate to leave them. Then they start making the offer so sweet, it was hard to give up. He said, when are you going on vacation? I says, well, I'm going about June the 1st. He said, how long are you going to be? I said, 2 weeks. He said, why don't you take a month and we'll pay the other 2. So I got 2 weeks vacation out of it. Went to work with them and retired for them in 1953, wasn't it? No, it couldn't have been 53.
When you were 85.
Yeah, I know it was in my 80s when I retired. 84, yeah. And we still have contact with my employer. Well, I work for his father, I work for his son, and I work for his grandson. 3 generations of Applers. And we're still in contact with them. We became very good friends. Matter of fact, we'll be going up to his cabin in Deep Creek in the end of July, is it? Oh, September.
Saturday.
Oh, Saturday. You see how far behind I am? Yeah. But we maintained good friendship. We always got along very well. So they treated me very well. That's why I stayed with them so long. So we still have contact.
Well, sir, I want to thank you again for sitting down with me and telling me your story.
I hope I haven't messed you up any.